Welcome to the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with international medical charity Operation Smile. If you'd like to find out more about this cause, please visit emearecruitment.com/operation-smile. In this episode, we welcome Tiffani Bova, the Global Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce, who discusses the path to growth and innovation in sales.
So hello everybody, welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with our good friends over at Operation Smile. So as my colleague Rose has just mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Tiffani onto the show today. So hopefully you can hear me okay today, Tiffani. Yeah?
Oh yeah, all is good. Nice to be with you, Paul.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you as a guest on today. Really honoured to have some time with you. And I thought I'd just check whereabouts are you in the world today?
Today, I'm in Los Angeles, California, so on the west coast of the U.S.
Nice. That's it's good to know. I suspect probably a lot better weather than we have in the UK at the moment. So so quite jealous of that, I think.
That sometimes is the usual occurrence.
Yeah, this is it. I have a good friend who lives over in LA, and he's always sending us photos of the great weather and the great stuff happening over there. And it's it is one of those things that the jealousy runs high there. So great place to be. And I guess obviously we're recording this now in September, and I know that the travel is a bit easier. Things have got a bit easier on everyone's lives with the whole COVID situation. And I suppose it's very difficult to have a podcast and a conversation these days without at least asking the question, how you've been over the whole COVID period, and whether there's anything particularly you've learned about yourself over this time, really.
Oh, well, it's been an interesting 18 months as it has been for really everybody. But, my day job usually requires me to get on airplanes. So in 2019, I flew 600,000 kilometers or 275,000 miles, and I was on 6 continents. And then, I landed from Sydney literally like March 9th of 2020, just a couple days before the border shut down. And so I, have not got back on a plane for work yet. And my first work trip is coming up in a couple weeks, and I can't wait. It's like I really just miss the human interaction from a work perspective. It is not overrated. It is one of the things that is just kind of makes me smile. So I'm looking forward to getting back on the road.
No, that's it. It has been, as you say, it's been tough. I think not being able to see people in person and interact in that way, it's been challenging. And I think that whilst we have video conference and phone calls are a possibility, it still doesn't replace the human interaction that you get from the meetings in person. So it's good that we're able to even talk about this now, because certainly 20 months ago it felt like it was something that was almost going to be impossible to see was going to happen again. So it's good to see that you've already got plans to get back on a plane. And I know you mentioned there about the fact that's made you smile, being able to get back on the plane and get back to some kind of normality again. And I thought actually, as the show that we have is in partnership with Operation Smile, I usually like to ask the guest just a fairly light-hearted question to start with, and just ask you really what the last thing was that made you smile, Tiffani.
Well, I took a trip home. I was born and raised in Hawaii, very blessed that is in fact the case. And so I just went home, literally floated in the ocean, stared up at the clouds, and had a huge smile on my face. So I'd say that would be the most recent big smile I had.
Cool, and that's a very good reason to smile, being over in Hawaii. I actually got engaged in Hawaii, so it holds a special place in my heart over there. So I can't imagine what it would have been like being born and brought up in Hawaii, but I guess a lot of special memories there, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. No, that's it. And I know obviously one of the biggest questions I had for you today, I mean, clearly, you've come such a long way in your life and career from, the starting off in Hawaii to now being one of the Thinkers 50 in 2019. You've been recognized as one of the most powerful and influential women in California, a top 50 sales and marketing influencer. I mean, the list is actually endless in terms of the accolades you've had. And I just wondered, how the journey really started and what has really led you to where you are now in your career.
Well, I like to often say that, look, I grew up in sales and selling technology. I did it for some 15 years. And then I worked at various startups and Fortune 500 companies, always tech. And then I landed at Gartner Group, which is the world's largest analyst and consulting firm, where I became a research fellow. And that's really where I honed my, superpower of being able to look at disparate data points and find commonality and really understand what are the signals telling the market so that I can tell that story in a way that is compelling to get executives and companies to reimagine what's possible, especially around using technology and growth in their business. So I think I have this unique balance between a practitioner, having run sales, marketing, and customer service, and then being an academic, watching it, studying it, and advising for a decade. And now working at Salesforce, they created a role for me to really continue to do those two things that I love so much. So I'd say that it was an accidental journey that landed me here. And I'm just thankful that the market appreciated the work that I was doing and landed me on things like the Thinkers 50 list.
No, it's really interesting because, with the other guests we have on the podcast, whether they're fellow Thinkers 50 or whether they are C-level executives in multinational businesses, when we ask them the question about their career, more often than not, it starts from something, an accidental meeting or a chance encounter or whatever it may be, and that started them on their journey. And I think you mentioned there, it sounds quite similar to yourself. But I guess it's also one of those things that when you're going through that, it is obviously a hell of a lot of drive and enthusiasm and motivation to take you from the beginning to then where you are now. And I suppose there's also dealing with a lot of doubt over the course of that time as well. I mean, so yeah, I mean, what is it you think about yourself that's really pushed you to this level? Because it's obviously not an easy path, because otherwise everybody would do it, so what is it about yourself that's really enabled you to get to where you are now from a personality point of view, do you think?
I think it was early on growing up. I was always in sports. And if you're listening to this and you have kids, I am always a fan of putting them in sports at an early age. And not because they're going to, end up playing professional football, but more because it teaches you a lot about teamwork. It teaches you a lot about being coached, when you aren't doing things right, that you don't take it as an affront, but you take it as really someone cares and wants you to be the best you can be in whatever position you're playing in that particular sport. It also teaches you how to win with humility and lose with your head held high. And there's so many lessons in athletics that I think are really important. And if it's not athletics, maybe it's music. It's something that has some sense of structure that requires learning and teamwork and some kind of competition in some way, even if it's competition with yourself. And so I think that has always pushed me. I played sports competitively for almost 20 years. And so I think that ultimately that is where a lot of my drive and competition comes in, as well as my openness and willingness to always stay very curious to learn ways to do things better.
No, I mean, it's obviously, you mentioned the sports side. I mean, were any particular sports in particular you were interested in or played to a good level?
So when I was really young, it was tennis. And so I enjoyed tennis a lot and got pretty good at it until about 11 or 12. And then I realized that I was actually number one in the state of Hawaii at that age, that I didn't really like individual sport. I really wanted team sport. So I stopped playing tennis and then started playing team sports. So whether it was, American soccer, European football, I played soccer, I played softball, I played basketball, I played volleyball. And then being from Hawaii, I surfed, I paddled, I did all the things in the water that I could. But I found that volleyball was something I really enjoyed. And so I really kind of made that my sport of choice, even though I played multiple sports every year through high school. And then went on to college and played volleyball as well. And then when I was out of college, I stopped playing competitively and then just played for fun. But now I'm Now I'm too old. I'm not as good anymore at much. So, now I just, I picked up golf and hike and walk and swim and do everything that's not so hard on my body because I've abused it over the years.
No, but it's interesting. We've had a few gold medal Olympians on the podcast over time, and there's so many similarities and synergies you see with successful people in sports compared to successful people in business. I mean, it is still going above and beyond what the average person might do. It's putting the hours in, the hard work, working through the adversity. It's all these things you mentioned there, about team sports or individual sports. It's having that mentality, and it does cross over into the business world as well. And I think, one of the things you mentioned a couple of times is the team side of things. And I know I saw a really good quote on your LinkedIn page about, if you can get the employees to love their job, then customers will love your brand. And I think that's something that I know Richard Branson really emphasizes a lot in his publications. And so you feel that the team side of things and getting people to work as teams and love their life and jobs is really the center that can make organizations successful, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will be fully transparent here. It was a miss for me. I wrote a book called Growth IQ, which has been translated in 9 languages. It's become a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And I only lightly peppered employee through the book. Yet the book was all about how do you pull certain levers to drive growth for the organization. So I've been spending quite a bit of time on some new primary research around this concept of the connection between employee satisfaction and engagement and customer experience, leading to faster growth rates for brands. And lo and behold, in the US, our research proved out that companies can grow at 1.8x growth rates. And so for $1 billion brand, it can be about a $40 million impact. And so we wanted to prove it on a global basis. So we've just finished fielding that research that's going to be covering really 6 regions, including EMEA, APAC, LATAM, and North America. And Australia, New Zealand. And so, we're really looking forward to see what that has to say. But it's, I think it's going to be the foundation for the second book that I do. And it's really, if you will, the 11th path that I missed on my 10 paths to growth.
Mm-hmm. No, because you mentioned the Growth IQ book that you brought out. And it was obviously a question I wanted to ask you around as well, because I think, there's that saying that everybody has a book in them, but the majority of people don't then sit down and put pen to paper and start writing something. So, I mean, how did you, I suppose, initially even find the time to do that? And, because it's not an easy thing to do. And I think you need a lot of time put aside to put something like this together, So was it just something that you were really driven to do and you made the time for it because of that?
Yeah, I will tell you that, I mentioned sort of how much I usually travel. And that fly time was my thinking time. That I wrote that book on an airplane or in an airplane lounge or in a hotel lobby. And so, it was built around these thousands of conversations I've had over the last 15 years as an advisor. And they all sort of were the foundation for how do I capture all that learnings that I had over that time and put it in some kind of easy to consume framework. So what's been difficult for me now is getting that thinking time, really carving it out because, I'm day in and day out, as most of us are, in the same 4 walls. And those conversations are not organically happening. So I felt a little bit stagnant really on my own learning journey over the last 18 months. It's been more difficult to find that thinking time. So I'm really looking forward to get back on the road because of that. And when my publisher said, hey, would you write another book? The first thing I thought was, I better get back on an airplane. And so the last time I was home, I was sitting in the lobby of a hotel because I had to get some work done. And I just blazed through the work in like an hour. And I was like, wow, that was amazing. And I realized it was because I was in a hotel lobby and the noise and the stimulation of the people around me actually helped me really focus in. It's the quiet in the 4 walls with no people that I feel I get very easily distracted. So I think that you have to make time each day to be a student of whatever profession you're in. And if you don't, then you're just not open to learning new things and new ways of doing things.
Hi everybody, it's Paul Thomas here. I hope that you're well and you're enjoying the podcast so far. Thank you once again for your continued support listening to the podcast. I just wanted to break into the recording to talk to you about a really exciting new partnership that EMEA Recruitment has along with Operation Smile. And as founder of EMEA Recruitment, it's an honour and a privilege to announce this partnership. Personally, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, so the mission of Operation Smile is something that I have a strong personal connection with. It's not an understatement to say that the dentists and surgeons that helped me were life changers. It's not only about the actual operations that take place, the support and care post and pre-operation are beyond value, and from personal experience I can only say that I'd not be the confident, happy person I am today without this support. I want to help children experience the support and care and skill that I experienced on my journey and hope that we can do this along with Operation Smile. Every 3 minutes, a child is born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, and the mission of Operation Smile is to provide help and support to these children through providing 6,000 medical volunteers across 80 countries who are dedicated to help these children with facial conditions, most commonly cleft lip and cleft palate. More than 200,000 children are born with a cleft every year, and they are often unable to speak, eat, socialise or even smile. However, it can take as little as 45 minutes and cost just €180 or 182 francs for Operation Smile to provide a child with life-changing surgery. Now, in partnership with Operation Smile, EMEA Recruitment is raising valuable funds and aiming to create 100 new smiles to support the organisation to provide free surgeries for children and young adults all over the world. Please help us by donating through the link in the bio or get in touch to see how your company can help get involved too. For the moment, I'll leave you to carry on listening to the rest of the podcast, but if there's anything I can do in terms of answering any questions or finding out how you can help and support EMEA Recruitment and Operation Smile, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you once again and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I mean, what do you do actually to relax and rest? Because obviously everything we're talking about so far today has been about you taking a lot of action, whether it's within your business, writing a book, whether sports and so on, but I suppose, there is a point where you need to switch off, so when do you do that and what do you do to switch off really?
That's a great question because I think that when I was in the throes of that book, there was no downtime, right? Because I was working full time and writing a book, in my off hours, which meant I was really full time. And traveling that kind of mileage, especially since it's been pretty consistent. It's been, north of 200,000 miles a year now for, 10 or 12 years. That downtime is really when I'm, in transit and traveling, where I'm just quiet. There's no conversation, and I'm sort of reflecting and figuring out, what is next for me. Whether it's a work day or not. But when it's really, I want to unplug, I would say that the last 18 months have taught me how to really unplug, where we have no meeting Thursdays and I don't take meetings on Thursdays. And once a month we have a Wellness Friday and I work at Salesforce. And so when we first implemented that Wellness Friday, it was interesting. You'd still get emails. Now, 18 months in, it's like crickets. No one sends emails on that Friday, but unless you're in another country because they're already in their Saturday. So they're sending emails, or their Thursday, is kind of our Wednesday. You kind of lose a day. But for all intent and purposes, everyone is taking it really seriously. And I think it's given permission for people to take those breaks during the day to take care of their own mental health and well-being. And I think that I hope that continues going forward because it's been a really great change of pace for me.
Mm-hmm. No, it's really true. I mean, it's one of these things we've seen over the last 20 months that, despite all the challenges that there's been because of the COVID situation, there has been a huge opportunity for companies to look after their employees in the right way. You mentioned Salesforce with what they're doing there, and I think, if companies have seen this and tried to look after the people that work with them, then, it encourages obviously people to stay within the businesses, to bring the best version of themselves to work. And I think it creates a better team environment. We've seen other companies do the opposites, and insist that people come into the office five days a week, and haven't really moved with the times on that side. And you see now that the market is improving in the job market, that these companies that haven't reacted well to it are losing good people, because these people remember how they were treated when they really needed help.
Exactly. You nailed it. And I think that it has become a conversation that's top of mind. I'm talking about employees, talking about the job market, talking about skill development and opportunity for advancement, and all of these things that people might have been talking about pre-pandemic has now come to the forefront of so many conversations. And you have to work harder and make more investment in your people if you want them to stay. But part of it also, I think, in some of the research I've seen, is people really have taken this time to reflect, am I doing what I love doing? Right? Is work bringing me joy? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel burnt out? Do I feel like I'm not spending enough time with my family or whatever it might be? And reassessing their life, if you will, especially if you've been in the workforce for some time, versus those that are just entering the workforce now have a very different perspective of what their future of work will look like. So I've also been inspired to see people make changes that were really just about making sure that they were happy where they spend the majority of their life, which is work. And so, I think there's the other side of the coin. It's not just that employers might not have been treating their people appropriately during this time, but some of it is people actually taking this opportunity to reassess.
No, it's true. And I think, the reassessments for individuals and companies has been a huge talking point most recently. But a part of that discussion point is also been a lot around diversity and inclusion. And I know diversity is something that you've been a big champion of as well. And I think, it felt like I should ask you the question on this. Obviously, as a woman, coming as far as you have in your career, how do you feel the world is now in terms of diversity and inclusion? Because we see, when I ask these questions, we get a huge variety of responses, and I thought it'd be good to ask you, given that you've obviously had a huge amount of success as a woman in the States, but also globally recognized. How do you see the whole world now from the diversity and inclusion angle?
Well, having sold tech starting all the way back in 1995, it's been a little bit. I for sure was one of the only women doing it back then. What's been great over this time is to see that I'm not the only woman in the room. For the most part now, in the US for sure, but on a global basis, more and more. But it's also been great to see, also diversity in, language, in origin, right? In, people of color. So it's been great to see it be a broader conversation than just male and female, because I think that diversity comes in many different ways besides just that. But still culturally, there are places that I travel where, I have to be aware of the cultural role of women in business, and sort of when they speak up and when they sort of, share their point of view and how to do it. So there's also the awareness of not everyone is in the same place that others may be. And so, I have never thought of it that it's worked to my advantage or to my disadvantage. And maybe I'm naive in that way, but I was like, look, they're either going to buy from me or they're not. And it's because I either did a good job or I didn't. I never thought that it was because I was a woman and they didn't want to buy from me, or that's why they didn't want to take a meeting from me. But what's been great to see is the openness of understanding the value of diversity of teams. And I'm just going to use like diversity of thought as an example. Is a company full of everyone who thinks the same way and it's just group think? Or, are they open to having diversity of thought? And that may come in many shapes and sizes, right? You have introverts and extroverts. You have people of institutional knowledge and have worked someplace for 20 or 30 years. versus people who have been there, 6 months. That diversity of thought is actually more powerful. And the way to get that is to then expand the pool of people that you hire. They should always represent who your customers are and the markets in what you're selling in. So, unless you're selling to, only male clients, then there might be some argument that we probably should have more men in product development. But I also see many organizations where the products are mostly for women and the CEO and product leaders are all men. So there is some, benefit, but there's also lots of opportunity for improvement.
No, I think it does come back a bit to what you mentioned earlier. If you can have great teams, if you can have the situation where people enjoy coming into work, they love their jobs, I think this, part of that is having a diverse culture, different viewpoints that challenge your own views, and so you learn and develop from having these other views around you. And I think it's a very different world now to the one certainly when I started in recruitment 20 years ago. The first question most people used to ask me was, how much does this role pay? Whereas now it's more about, what are the values, what are the ethics, what's the diversity and inclusion program? It's the whole package of how the business operates, and it's very open now on platforms like LinkedIn, because you can see if a company isn't treating people well, if it doesn't hire a certain gender or background, then you can see on LinkedIn very easily the people who are being hired and let go. And I think, so companies are having to keep on their toes, but also to think of new ideas to keep the next generation of great talent coming through.
Absolutely. Well said.
Now, I know you, as mentioned earlier on, you have your own really successful podcast, and I know one of the focuses of that is really the question around what's next for growth and innovation and sales. So I thought I'd almost flip that round and ask you the question. Really, I know it's a question you ask your guests. So, I mean, from your point of view, where are you seeing the future in sales and growth from what you've seen so far?
What's been amazing to see over the last year and a half is the acceleration of digital transformation pretty much globally. Overnight, the lack of investment that had been made by organizations of all sizes was unfortunately had a spotlight on it, because, adjusting to selling, servicing, and engaging with customers from anywhere was not necessarily something that every company was able to do. So take a call center, for example. You have 100 people or 200 people in a call center with a desktop, and they're taking, customer service calls all day. And then boom, overnight, call centers closed. They're all home and they need to provide service, but they have desktops. Nobody had a notebook. Couldn't go back into the office. How could they spin up very quickly the ability to communicate and respond to customer service requests from existing customers? And so that is just an example. And some small businesses still didn't even have a website or have the ability to conduct commerce. Think about restaurants that didn't have their menu online or didn't have the ability to do delivery, or grocery stores. And so, very quickly, so much investment was flooded into the market. But for me, digital transformation is digital as technology, and transformation is really the people process side of the business. So I think the future will be much better utilization of tech on things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's really, the future is human and tech, not human alone and not tech alone. It is really the combination of those two things. So I'm excited to see how use cases will continue to evolve in using some of the new technology we have to not only solve big complex problems from a business perspective, but also the societal problems that have also been uncovered over the last 18 months, in inequalities and all kinds of things like access to high-speed internet. If everything's going to be remote, education and healthcare and commerce, and yet everyone doesn't have access to high speed, then it's an equal environment. So that's the things that I really look forward to seeing continue to evolve over time.
I mean, obviously, you mentioned that on the technology side and the communicating with customers and so on. I mean, I think obviously, I think what the challenge that a lot of people have, whether it's in sales, marketing, or any communication related discipline, is you have so many options to communicate with people now, or using technology, that actually the meeting in person becomes something that's often I find a lot of people try to even avoid, because it's obviously easier to send a one-line email than it is to get on the phone or video with somebody and have an in-depth conversation because of the challenges of time. So do you think the obviously the increased technology will have it could potentially have a challenging impact on actually how people communicate when it comes to sales and marketing in the future, really?
For me, I hope that it is absolutely much more connected, and I would add in there customer service. I think the conversation has been so focused for the last multiple decades around breaking down the silos between sales and marketing. But the new Salesforce for me, 2 words, Salesforce for me, is really customer service. And it's the triangulation of those 3 groups that are very customer facing and have the ability to impact revenue. Both on the input side, right, top line revenue, as well as reducing churn on the bottom line from a customer service perspective. That it's really those 3 things. And so, greater integration, shared KPIs, customer centricity, with an employee first mindset is where I think growth will happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think, as you mentioned there, I think it's still having the close relationship with people and the customer is key around that. And I think, one of the continuing that theme, we see that most successful people are surrounded by great mentors. I think you become the sum of the people you spend the most time with. So I thought it'd be interesting just to ask you, who's had the biggest influence on your career and why that has been.
That's a great question. I think that there are different parts of my day-to-day that I have inspiration. When you think about when I was on the journey of people considering me a thought leader, because I don't think you can just put a flag in the sand and say I'm a thought leader. I mean, I think it has to kind of come externally. Was I really looked to that Thinkers 50 list. It's 50 of the world's best management thinkers. And I tried to connect with as many as I could over a course of a decade. And some of them have become champions for me. And in some ways, mentors when there were times that I needed some advice. And so from a pure thought leadership standpoint, I think that list has just been amazing, and one on, there's a couple on there particular, but Seth Godin, who everybody should know if you're in marketing, has written a number of best-selling books, and he's just an amazing human. We met way back in 2000, and he stayed very close to me in my career over time, and we've ended up speaking at events together, and he was the cover quote on my book in the US. I think the cover quote for UK was Arianna Huffington. Seth sat me down one day and says, you really need to write a book. And when Seth Godin says you need to write a book, you go, okay, I guess I need to write a book, right? And so, that's definitely one. Tom Peters, who wrote the book In Search of Excellence and is really sort of one of the grandfathers of management thinking. It was the very first business book I ever read. I was 17 years old. It was all the way back in like 1982 or 3. And lo and behold, some almost 40 years later, he was endorsed my book. So we became, friends and what a full circle moment. So, it's really, figuring out who do I think is really amazing in that particular space and how do I network to get learnings from them. So that, that's kind of, that whole group was really big for me. And then, from a executive standpoint, look, when I first started selling technology, there were no female technology CEOs at all. And then Carly Fiorina was really the first for Hewlett Packard. And then you've had Ginny Rometty for IBM. You've had Meg Whitman for eBay, and then ultimately HP. You've got Safra Katz at Oracle. There's only a handful, that have been there. So it was a lot that you can't be what you can't see. So I think you brought it up, right? Women in tech. And so those were probably ones from a career perspective that I would look to. but I have a lot that I call kind of my tribe, my sort of symphony of those that are around me that play very different roles. And so I'd say if you're listening to this and you're looking to advance your career, find those champions that will speak positively of you when you're not in the room, and also offer you up for roles and taking on stretch challenges. And they're not necessarily mentors. And then, you may find accidental mentors. I'm not a fan of asking someone to be your mentor. Sometimes I think it's happened organically for me. So I've liked that better, where there's an established relationship and then you just sort of really try to formalize it from a mentorship standpoint. But there's all kinds of people, as I mentioned, Arianna Huffington endorsed my book. She's been amazing to me in my career. And that happened from a happenstance, walking in Los Angeles and bumping into her in a restaurant. We started a conversation, and then she asked me to write for HuffPost. And then we've done a number of things together. She's been on my podcast and then endorsed my book, all from bumping into her at a coffee shop. So you never know. You never know how it will happen. You never know how.
I mean, it's so bizarre. I mean, what does it feel like to have people like Arianna and Seth, writing forwards on your book? I mean, it must be. Do you have to pinch yourself sometimes and think, okay, I'm now mixing with these people? I mean, just interesting to know what it feels like to be in this great network of people, really.
It's surreal. It's absolutely surreal. Jeffrey Moore wrote the foreword to my book. And if you know who Jeffrey is, he wrote the book Crossing the Chasm, and one of those other books that I read very early on and had huge impact on how I advised clients. And so, I often say that I stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before me. And I feel that way every single time I get an opportunity to show appreciation for any of those people. I do, as I just did on your question and my answer. I do not take it for granted. And, I know that, it comes from a high level of respect, and I respect that relationship. I don't overstep those bounds, and I would say that when people introduce me or talk about those accolades, sometimes it's just an out of body experience. I sort of go, I'm a girl from Hawaii, who enjoys surfing and floating in the ocean and looking up at the sky and smiling, right? That there is definitely a sense of awe in what people have been willing to do to invest in me.
No, it's an amazing story. And just sort of the penultimate question I had for you really was, I know you have this successful podcast and you've had some great guests on there already, as you mentioned to us today. But I mean, is there anyone, let's say historically or someone alive today even, that you think you would love to have on if you could have two guests on the same show? Are there any two that will really stand out for you?
I don't know if I'd have them on the same show, but I definitely would say I would love to interview Oprah Winfrey. I think she is a master interviewer and a master orator, and has a really unique perspective. Also, kind of breathing the air at that very 1% that has conversations and influences so much in the world. I think that would be a super fascinating conversation. And I'm not sure I could get a question out because I'm not sure what I would ask. You often say like that Arianna, accidental bump into, right? In that 5 second, you go, oh my God, I need to go say something. And then you're like, then what do I say? What do I say? Right. And so I don't know what I would ask Oprah the first question. I think it would be fascinating. If I had to pick two, I would pick her and Michelle Obama probably simultaneously, because I think that would be really an interesting conversation. And then if it were to get to, CEOs, I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Richard Branson. We've done things together, but I've never had a conversation, just kind of had a conversation that wasn't very scripted as part of something I was doing. I think he would also be really interesting to talk to. Because he's also had a really interesting perspective, but also shares a lot of, my thinking, which you mentioned at the beginning when we talked about employee and customer experience. So I think he would be very fascinating. There's people that are alive, right? There's a bunch I would want to interview that are no longer here, but those would be a couple that I would love to interview.
Excellent. And I guess the last question for you, I mean, and I suppose, one of the things that I really like about Richard Branson is, so many motivational quotes that personally have inspired me through the career. And I didn't know if you had a favorite motivational quote that, maybe you have on your wall in your home office, or something that's really inspired you from one of these people you mentioned already, or somebody different.
Yeah, I always say, trust the process. Like I say it to myself all the time. I use it, that you just have to trust the process. It doesn't always work out the way you want. Some moves in your career are going to be lateral. Some may even be a step down, but all in the spirit of trying to continue to further, forward. And if you try to force that process, it doesn't always work out. And so while it's uncomfortable and it's unsettling in many ways, I just say trust the process.
Oh, no, sounds like a great way to conclude the podcast, Tiffani. So really, really appreciate your time today. I know you're really busy, so it's great to have 40 minutes with you today. And I think it's been really inspiring for me. I know the network will get a lot from this conversation as well. And I thought I'd ask, if the network wants to connect with you, what is the easiest way they can reach out to you, Tiffani?
Yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn as well as Twitter. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. But LinkedIn and Twitter are probably my most active. And then I always, enjoy sort of hearing back. If there was something that really resonated with you from this podcast, drop me a note. Let me know what it was. And also, if you disagreed with something that I said on this podcast, I always love to hear as well, because that's how I continue to learn, right? Conversation is the greatest way to, continue moving forward.
Mm-hmm. No, excellent. And I guess obviously because a lot of our network are EMEA based. I mean, have you got any plans to be over in this area over the next year or so?
Yeah, I wish. I had a couple events that were in Spain and Italy that I had to ultimately end up passing on. With the requirements coming in and out. Moving on a daily basis. And it doesn't always make it easy if something happens and I'm out of country to get myself back. So my next sort of international trip, I think, is going to be Canada. But I can't wait. Normally I'm in region 10 to 12 times a year. So I can't wait until the opportunity presents itself. I'm hoping it's in the next, sort of 6 months that I get myself across the pond back over to the UK.
Oh, cool. I look forward to that. I'm going to make sure I keep an eye open on your LinkedIn page, and then hopefully we can meet in person when you're over. That would be really cool. And I know the network will be excited to see that as well. So once again, Tiffani, huge thanks for the time today, and obviously enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll be in touch again soon.
All right. Thank you, Paul, for having me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you'd like to reach out to Paul or myself, please feel free to send a connection through on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to listen to previous episodes of the podcast, you can find them all at our website, www.emearecruitment.eu.